So, what do you think about teens in sports today, and what are the biggest pressures they're facing?
I think I can base it off my own experience. I think some teens will be facing the pressure of wanting to be professional. They'll be facing the pressure of their coaches, their parents. And I think a lot of the pressure comes from expectations from other people, which then stems into themselves. And then they expect themselves to perform to a certain level. And if they don't get to that level, it's a big disappointment. And I think there's also just pressures in general from teammates and just wanting to be a good athlete.
Yes. So, lots of pressures. And of course, there's no training to deal with these pressures, right? Especially when you're young. And you feel things much more acutely because you've got less lived experience. You don't realize things pass and they don't matter as much. But when you're that age, I imagine it's really painful. Okay, so you've got a teenager who's experiencing performance anxiety, but they don't know what they're feeling. I imagine the same was true for you, right? You didn't know what was this thing that's going on inside. How would you explain it to them, to a teenager? What would you say?
So I often experienced it, and I won't diagnose myself with it, but it is the sort of symptoms you get from performance anxiety from when I was doing athletics. And I was very nervous before any race. I would need the toilet. I would be shaking. I wouldn't be able to stay still. And it was doing my research project that I understood that I was just setting very high expectations for myself, and I was very nervous about not meeting them. And sometimes I'd be running, and I'd before a race I'd be like, oh, it would be quite nice if I wasn't running tomorrow. It'd be quite like sometimes I'd actually maybe want to be a bit ill or like a or get an injury, and I never really wanted to, but just the idea of maybe escaping the race and not having to do it. I remember this cross country, I cried before doing it once. I
Well,
was that nervous about doing it because I think I knew it was going to be hard and I knew I had the capabilities to do well. And I was just so nervous about meeting those expectations. So those sort of feelings, if you're very nervous before a race,
and you can
but
get
there's not
sweaty
really a specific,
palms, a racing
yeah,
chest, um,
yes.
a tight head, maybe, and stomach cramps. Some people get stomach physical symptoms, right? Okay. So now let's slow this whole thing down. So there's a race, there's this anxiety, and there are all these expectations, right? And there's a gap between expectations and then reality. And it's that gap that creates this anxiety, right? Now, do you think we're aware of how all these expectations are shaping our thinking, or they just happen unconsciously?
I think as a young kid, as a teenager, you're most likely not very aware. And I
Hmm.
think that's what I struggled with because I never really understood why I was so nervous until later on when I was no longer competing. I think as you get older, you're very much aware. And I think that's where, sports psychologists can work with teens that age and make them aware. I just think at that moment, I didn't have that because I wasn't aware of sports psychology. And that's what stemmed my passion for it.
Okay,